Hello and welcome to LDEI Live Online. I'm your host, Sheila Cry. Les Dames d'Escoffier International offers these monthly online events as a member benefit, bringing you expert speakers to address current topics of interest to a wide range of women culinary professionals. Today, we will take a deep dive into where we are with GLP-1 medications used by some people to manage diabetes and heart disease, and by others to manage their weight. Our speakers include moderator Kara Nielsen, president of the San Francisco chapter of Les Dames d'Escoffier and owner of a food and beverage trend consultancy. Marion Nestle created the Food Studies program at New York University and led the broader Nutrition and Food Studies department for 15 years. She is a LDEI Grande, and she blogs regularly at foodpolitics.com, sharing insights with thousands of social media followers. Shaun Chavis is a content strategist and former journalist specializing in health and food. She and Kimberly Charles speak from personal experience with GLP-1 meds. Kimberly is a marketing strategist with 4 decades of global PR and marketing expertise in the wine and spirits industry. To save time, I've given you the briefest of introductions to each of the speakers. For more details, see the event announcement on the LDEI website under the Live Online tab. And now we welcome moderator Kara Nielsen.
Thank you, Sheila, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. This is such a hot topic. I'm a trend tracker, and I love nothing else than to follow something that's moving so quickly and to see how it's really impacting the food industry and all of us in the food industry, as well as society at large. This program started with a program we did for the LDEI Table Talk back in March 2024. And we invited Marion and Shaun, as well as a journalist from the Washington Post, to discuss how Ozempic was starting to impact the food industry, how it would impact our appetites, what the ramifications might be for enjoying food and gathering. And at that point, it was still on the, a bit of the new side. Our presentation came out a few weeks before Oprah had a very well publicized televised special on TV talking about Ozempic and her own use of these medications. Since then, so we're talking about 18 months later, it has really exploded as a topic, and it's hard for anyone to not have heard about it. Some of the changes include even what we call it. We started off, it was sort of a generic Ozempic, which was a brand name of one of the drugs that was originally intended for diabetes management, but was being used for weight loss. And now there's a plethora of drugs that are available, and we tend to call it by more of a generic name of GLP-1s, which are glucagon-like peptides. And it's these peptides that we take in our body that help control and change our appetite. And we're learning not just for food, but for all kinds of things that may be a little out of balance. Right now, it's said that GLP-1s have already generated over $71 billion in the US since launch. They've been out for quite a while, so this isn't in just the last couple of years, but it's really exploded. And I could probably give you any number of big numbers of where it's headed for the future, but this is big business, which also makes it something that we really need to pay attention to. Is this healthcare? Is this pharmaceutical money? Is this going to be and lead to food industry money? And the answer is yes to all of the above. So we're going to be exploring that today. We've brought back two of our panelists, Marion Nestle from New York University and Shaun Chavis. who's a good friend of mine who has personal experience with the drug and has also worked in the compounding industry, the telehealth industry. So she has a real inside look at kind of how these things operate and where that industry is headed. We're also going to hear from Kimberly Charles, who has personal experience as a wine and food professional taking one of these medications. We also are going to be answering some of your questions. A few of you sent questions ahead of time. If you have a question as we're going through today, please send me a personal chat. You can do that by going to the chat feature, clicking the plus button, selecting my name as who you're sending the chat to, and I will keep track of those questions. Hopefully, we will answer some of them over the course of this program. But we will do our best to answer them all. This is a very tight 1 hour program, so I'm going to get started. I also have to say one thing. We are not doctors of medicine. Some of us are doctors, but not of medicine. So we are just sharing our experience and professional expertise. This is not, we are not giving any medical advice, so please do not ask us medical related questions. So without any further ado, I'm going to move forward and start with Marion. Marion, you have been, when we first had our presentation in March 2023, you were sort of new, a little newer to the topic. And, we were talking about, oh my gosh, this is coming. Have you seen it? And you brought your usual skepticism and feet on the ground attitude. So tell us, since we had our last panel, what changes have you seen with the popularity of the drug and also its position in the public health conversation?
Well, I think, first of all, I'm very glad to be here. I think this is the most riveting topic. I'm an academic. I'm not a GLP-1 taker. I better get that on the table right away. But I was very interested in it at the beginning a couple of years ago. I thought it was an amazing phenomenon. But, I'm a diet and health person. I don't really care about drugs. And it was clear that there was something about these drugs that was going to be stickier than most drugs. And it also was very clear that it was something I needed to pay very close attention to. And I have done that over the last couple of years in a couple of ways. I read the medical research on what's happening with the drugs. I'm pretty up on the trends, but because of the work on food politics that I do, I'm also incredibly fascinated by the effect of these drugs on the food industry, which has been profound. And is the food industry terrified? Yes. Um, so, what I'm observing and have seen over the last couple of years is, first of all, I'm astonished by the number of people who are taking these drugs. There are an estimated, it's very hard to count them because not all of them go through the regular prescription process. A lot of them come from online compounders, and the records on those aren't very easy to get access to. But it looks like there are about 12 million Americans who are taking these drugs. I have no idea how accurate that figure is, but it's the one that's most commonly used. And what we know about the drugs is, first of all, what GLP-1 drugs do is to normalize blood sugar levels. The purpose of glucagon is to counter the effect of insulin and make sure that you have enough blood glucose in your body to keep your brain functioning. It has other effects as well on the pancreas and on the liver and on the digestive system. I'm mostly interested in the digestive system things. And what is different about the drugs is that over the years, they have lasted increasingly longer. When I first encountered GLP-1 drugs, it was 2005. I was at a meeting of the American Diabetes Association, And Byetta, the first of the GLP-1 drugs, had just come on the market, and everybody was very excited about it because it reduced the symptoms of diabetes. But it had to be injected 4 times a day.
Oh.
A rather inconvenient problem. People, you can inject yourself, but it's not a lot of fun. Um, and so over the years, what's happened is that the drug manufacturers have been able to engineer the drugs so they are not destroyed in the body as quickly, and they last longer and longer and longer. And some of the drugs last as long as a week. And so more and more people are taking them, and the effects of them are becoming increasingly obvious. And the most fascinating of those effects is that in addition to slowing down digestion and making food last longer in the stomach, they eliminate what is called food noise, a term I had never heard, but I really like it. And food noise is the term given to obsession with food, thinking about food all the time. If you've got food in the house, you've got to eat it. Just preoccupation with food. Somehow, this drug stops that. So obviously, the drug also affects the brain in some way. People who are taking the drug lose weight. Not everybody, but most of the people taking the drug have lost weight. The food noise has stopped, their obsession has stopped, their symptoms of diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol have gone down. They feel better, they have more energy, they're sleeping better. I mean, the benefits go on and on and on. And I think it's really important to take those benefits seriously. One of the things that I've been doing in my general lectures, because I'm talking about these drugs in lectures now, because of the effect on the food industry, which, by the way, is to decrease food purchases by roughly 6% in restaurants and in grocery stores, and to make people who are on these drugs want healthier foods. From a nutritionist standpoint, this is amazing. People don't want to eat junk food. They want to eat healthy food. They want more protein, more vitamins, more fiber, all of those good things. It's kind of amazing. But one of the things I've been doing is asking audiences if anybody in the audience is taking these drugs. And if so, would they be willing to come up afterwards and privately tell me about their personal experience? And to my astonishment, I am deluged with personal experiences. First of all, I'm astounded by the number of people who are in my audiences who are taking these drugs, and also by their candor and willingness to share their experiences. And in general, and I'm going to absolutely summarize this in a not very deep way, people are pretty happy with the drugs. The people who stay on the drugs are pretty happy with them. They really like what's happening to their symptoms. And they all report side effects, but they find the side effects tolerable, particularly if the drugs have been started out as a low dose and then gradually increased over time. On the other hand, I have heard absolutely horrendous stories about side effects, nausea, vomiting, terrible digestive problems, stomach aches, just awful digestive problems. But for the most part, people are willing to put up with them because the benefits so outweigh the discomfort. And I talked to one very large man who I would have estimated weighed about 300 pounds when I met him, and he had already lost 100 pounds on the drug. And I saw pictures of him earlier, I believe it. And he said he was nauseous all the time. But that he tolerated it and he thought it was worth it because this was the first time in his life he had ever been able to lose weight. So we have these anecdotal accounts, and if I talk to foodie audiences, they say they still retain pleasure in food. They just don't want to eat as much of it. So, okay, fine. The research shows, and these anecdotal accounts are very consistent with what the research is showing. The research shows, however, that about half of the people who start taking a drug in any given year drop it at some point within the first year, mainly because of the cost, which is enormous and prohibitive, but secondly, because of the side effects. They just don't like the side effects. And what happens to these people is that almost all of them, not all, but almost all of them regain the weight and regain whatever their emotional connection to food was. The food noise comes back. It doesn't for everybody. People vary enormously in their responses to these drugs, but it does come back. And, for this reason, the drug companies are desperately trying to come up with versions of the drugs that will last a long time, will not make people sick, and are pills, not something that needs to be injected, and they want the cost to come down. And I think all of that will happen. It's just a question of one. On the long-term effects, people have only been taking them for a few years. It's really hard to tell. But we know that there are eye problems, liver problems, and other kinds of problems that have been reported. Very hard to know what percentage of people have these problems and how seriously they are, but it's absolutely being studied. And of course, what everybody who's on the drugs would like is to be able to go off the drugs and continue to maintain the benefits. And the drug makers are working on that too. So I'll stop there. I've talked long enough. I want to hear what everybody else says. Such an interesting topic.
It is. We could talk all day, but thank you, Marion. That's a great starting point. And I have a couple follow-up questions about the food industry, but I'll save that for later. I'd like to turn to Shaun now. As a GLP-1 user, you've also worked in the telehealth industry, doing content marketing, and know a lot about this compounding industry, which has been very much impacted by lawsuits, for example. Tell us a little bit about your journey here in the last year and a half or so and what you're seeing now in that space.
Yeah. So, and I'm assuming you're asking about my personal journey.
Yes.
Okay. So, the background for those of you who don't know me, I know many people in this audience, I've had a lifelong struggle with obesity. I weighed at my maximum 304 pounds. I have been dieting. The first time I went on a diet, my mother took me to a registered dietitian on a military base when I was 7 years old, and I've pretty much been dieting ever since. I later found out that I have PCOS, and I developed type 2 diabetes. I developed other conditions, back pain, knee pain. And when I developed type 2 diabetes, I used to be an editor at Health Magazine, and I was asked to do an article about weight loss surgery. And in the process of doing that report, I thought, if I ever develop type 2 diabetes, I'm going to have surgery. And that's exactly what happened. I had surgery because I wanted to put type 2 diabetes into remission, which weight loss surgery can do. I had been working with an obesity medicine specialist. I tried all kinds of diets. I'd done OptiFast and trainers and diet everything. And this particular obesity medicine specialist led clinical trials of some of the drugs that are on the market now. And so he told me before I had surgery, 3 months after you have your bariatric surgery, you need to start Ozempic. It ended up being 5 months because at the time there was a shortage of the drug. But I started it. Interestingly enough, in that time, the surgery did not, I had high blood pressure before surgery. I woke up from surgery, haven't had high blood pressure since. And it's been over 3.5 years now. So I saw some immediate health changes, but my type 2 diabetes, my A1C went down a little bit, but not into the pre-diabetic or normal range. So I started Ozempic. About a year and a half later, I switched to Manjaro. On the Manjaro, my A1C, so this has happened in the last year since we last talked, my A1C has dropped into the normal range
Great.
with Manjaro. So it's been a good experience for me. I've had side effects from the surgery because it's interacting with another drug that I'm taking, but I haven't really had any side effects from taking GLP-1s at all. The main thing is that the surgery and the weight loss, so I lost 140 pounds. The weight loss finally helped me become eligible to get knee replacement surgery. And so before surgery, you have to be off of the GLP-1s for a period of time. And I stayed off it for a little while longer. I was very closely monitoring my body composition using DEXA scans. The change in my muscle mass while I was on GLP-1s but not exercising because of the knee surgery was dramatic. Like I knew I was going to lose some muscle, but I was really shocked at how quickly I lost muscle. So it is, and I don't think enough people hear this. And the thing is, I'd worked really hard to build my muscle. I'd started strength training before I had my weight loss surgery, all throughout my weight loss, and I still do. But just recovering from surgery, I couldn't strength train for a while like I wanted to. So I was like really shocked by how much muscle mass I lost. And I thought, oh gosh, it's going to take me a year to do all this back. But I have been able to regain muscle mass and be where I want. But it's really important. And I don't think enough people hear that it's very important to strength train while you're on these drugs.
So Shaun, tell us, I'm just going to keep us moving here. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with the compounding industry right now, because that is where a lot of people, a lot of healthcare providers aren't making it easy to get access to these drugs. And so there's a whole private market. Tell us a little bit about that. And congratulations on your journey. And
Oh,
thanks for
thank you.
sharing.
Thank you. It is really unpredictable right now. There's never been in modern history um, an event like this where we have such a life-changing drug with a limited supply, and then compounding comes in to help support access to the drug, and now there's all this litigation and regulation happening and we're still figuring it out. um, so compounding is legal in certain circumstances. It's legal if there is a shortage of the drug and there needs to be an increased supply to meet health needs. And it's legal if there is someone on an individual basis who can't take the drug as it is produced commercially. And they need a different formulation to be able to tolerate the drug. So their physician has said this person really needs the drug, but they need some kind of modification to be able to take it. Right. So that could be everything from, you might have trouble swallowing pills and you need a liquid form, or, you can't do an injection, so you need like a tablet form. And those are usually done on an individual basis. What's happened with compounding and these drugs is the manufacturers got to a point where they were like, hey, you guys are on our street corner, you need to stop all this compounding. And the supply is normal, because remember at the beginning, like there was not a lot of supply. So in that case, compounding was legal because there needed to be more of the drug to support health needs. And then so the pharmaceutical companies ramped up production and they're like, hey, we're good, we don't need y'all compounding anymore. But companies like the company I worked for, Found Health, were making money, and that became a huge part of their revenue. So they didn't want to stop. And from a health perspective, there are so many people who needed the drug and couldn't afford it, and their insurance wouldn't cover it, and the list price is really expensive. So they wanted to kind of meet that need too, to help people still have access. So the way they've kind of navigated this is, what if we personalize it in batches. And so, like the company that I worked for example, came out with formulations, and some of the other companies in the industry are doing this, that personalize it, but it's not on an individual basis. So an example would be um, compounded GLP-1 plus vitamin B, because vitamin B helps people with nausea. Some healthcare providers tell their patients on GLP-1s to take vitamin B to help control the nausea. So these companies would create a formulation that's personalized because it has vitamin B added. It's really, again, kind of um, it's just a way to keep prescribing the medication, because when you think about, you're only injecting that GLP-1 once a week. Is vitamin B once a week really going to help you? Yeah, I don't know about you, but I take it every day, right? So it really was a way to kind of navigate how can we keep the supply, both from the business being able to continue its, lucrative revenue stream, but also how can we continue to meet demand and help people access the medicine affordably for people who need it. So that's what's happening with compounding. Most recently, the FDA just last month sent 16 warning letters to companies selling compounded drugs, giving them kind of like a cease and desist. Like you can't say, here's this GLP-1 or compounded semaglutide, same active ingredient as Ozempic. Like, so they've kind of put down the hammer on that. On the flip side, the UN has now added GLP-1s to its essential medicines list. And that's probably going to move some things in terms of accessibility. So it's still it's like our whole society is still figuring all of this out. I do think in the end, we're going to get to a place where it is affordable and accessible to people who need it. And there are multiple reasons why people need it. So that like demand is going to increase as GLP-1s continue to be approved for different uses, and there's more research behind even more conditions that it could be helpful for. So, and then there's so many other drugs in the pipeline that are GLP-1s or GLP-1 GIPs, which is what tirzepatide, Zepbound, and Mounjaro are. And then there's like a triple agonist, and there's like all kinds of other drugs that are similar that are in the pipeline. So this supply access issue is going then, and the other access issue is just place. Like people in communities that are marginalized have had trouble getting access to the drugs. So that's like another issue that is going to have to be worked out, and I think it will be. It's just going to take time.
Thank you, Shaun. I also know that some healthcare providers are sending letters out to their customers, like as they look at the rates for next year. And I've heard of people, going to start losing their benefits for this coverage. So very dynamic situation. I'd like to move now to Kimberly Charles and have Kimberly tell us about her journey, why she decided to go on it, and what it's been like as a wine and food professional to be on this medication. Kimberly.
Thanks, Kara. And this is a privilege to be able to be in this good company. And I've been a lifelong, like I think many women, avid follower of diets, from the South Beach to, keto diet, you name it. As a person in the wine industry now for 4 decades, there's been no shortage of meals, offered up at all times, part of your job. When I lived in New York in the 80s, it was at least 7 meals a week, dinners and lunches with journalists or VIPs, whatever it may be. So, when you're in your 20s and your 30s, you're doing great. You're fine. You manage it, drink a lot of water, weight gain doesn't happen. But then boom, I hit 50, and all of a sudden the menopausal weight gain started. And I kind of endured it for the better part of a decade, trying different things in terms of weight loss and not having a lot of success. The pandemic helped a little bit because it curbed the dining out, right? So I was able to control my food a little bit better. So we have that as sort of a a starting point. Then I sat with my doctor, my GP, and I said, look, I'd really love to get a glucose patch. I'm really big into tracking and numbers. I want to follow my glucose and manage it a little bit better. And I talked to several trainers, because trainers seem to be following the glucose goddess, a fair amount of them, that is, in terms of optimal health for anyone who's training. You know, it sort of looks at how you eat and how you stage your eating. And it really does try to manage your glucose as part of the outcome. She turned it down. She said, no, I'm sorry, you have to be obese for this to happen. And I was pretty frustrated, you know, because I pay a lot for insurance premiums, and I know this is a perennial problem, and it's something I personally want to advocate for, which is, you know, let people be preventative, please. So given that, I decided to, after actually, to be honest, the Table Talk in March of 2024, I was inspired by Shaun and Kara and the other presenters, Marion. And I said, okay, let me give it a go. I'll try it for a year and see how it works. And so I've been on Mounjaro for 18 months. Marion asked if I wanted to share my numbers. I mean, I can give them to you verbally. I'm happy to put them on the screen, but ostensibly, you know, that's where the facts are. My cholesterol has gone down. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, I'll be honest. And I'm the type of person who does regular lipid panel tests. I sort of like to know where I am at any given point. I do have high cholesterol in my family. It's hereditary. So my cholesterol went down at its most 30 points. It's now right around 20 total down. The good news is my HDLs went up, and they went up, let's see, 6 points. My LDLs went down close to 20 points. My fasting glucose went from 92 to 85 this is my trends report. This is what I love about Kaiser is, you know, they really will let you know where you stood. And then my triglycerides went down from 104 to 79. So the numbers don't lie, and that's been extremely helpful. What I'd like to mention is that I've heard people talk about how pleasure is really reduced. I will say this, I haven't had the pleasure challenge. I still love food. I cook a lot. I've dated several chefs. And I just enjoy the dining experience. What has changed for me, and what I think is an interesting outcome, is that my habits have gotten better. I suffered a lot of the symptoms, constipation, you know, sort of dulled appetite, but not dulled desire. And I found too, because wine has a lot of acidity, that the slowing down of the process of digestion made for an acid, you know, war in my stomach, and lots of reflux and staying, you know, when I first take the drug, and it still happens now, you know, I have to really watch what I eat. No tomatoes, don't drink wine when I first take it. It sort of tapers out over the course of the week. I do a weekly injection of Mounjaro. It has helped me shape and frame the way I eat. So what I've done is now sort of what would be a glucose goddess approach to my food, which is starting with my greens, then my proteins. If I have carbs, she says, dress up your carbs. So I put avocado on my toast. I put, you know, veggies in my pasta. I really don't deny myself the things that bring me pleasure. I just have, as has been shared here, less of those things. And when I dine out, you know, I'm kind of a leftover queen. I don't like food waste. So I don't try to bring up my journey in front of other people. If they're curious, I will certainly answer it, but I just ask for, you know, a takeaway box, and I'll have that the next day for lunch or thereabouts. So I just moderate in that regard. And that's been good. So I kind of self-police my eating throughout the day. I tend to do, you know, no breakfast. I don't really want a breakfast. I do a good healthy lunch, and I might have something very small in the late afternoon, usually before 6:30, unless of course I'm going out with friends, in which case, you know, I really do watch the progression of my food and that sort of thing. I'll be honest, there's a lot of us in the wine industry who are on this, and you can tell, you know, you look around the room and you're like, aha, you're over 50. I think you're probably on this journey. One of the big takeaways, there are a lot of us that are, have lost a lot of weight. I've lost 23 pounds. I'm not at my goal weight yet. And one of the things that I took away, especially from Shaun's share last spring, was the exercise factor. And for various reasons, oversubscribed with work, maybe a little bit more of a tendency to go for walks instead of doing cardio and weight training. I have gotten back on that bus, and I am on that journey for about 2 months now to get back into weight training and really getting the cardio. I love working out, but I have low motivation. So I'm turning a corner there. And I think the weight loss has really helped with that. As a friend of mine said, who is on this, she said, the joy of being able to fit into clothes that you couldn't wear before, used to wear, the compliments you might get. I'm not too much of a vain person, honestly, but it feels phenomenal, to be able to put on, a size that was 2 sizes down from where you were at your max. And I continue to enjoy that. And so, yeah, that's a bit of my journey. I'm happy to answer other questions later on, but that's where it is for me.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly. It's really inspiring to hear, people embrace it and kind of their challenges, and to think about, our own relationship with food. It sounds like you've got a really sort of sane and balanced approach to eating. And I think also we must be saving money on our food dollars. As Marion pointed out, the food industry is taking a hit. Um, I'm going to insert a question here before I move on, which is, we did have some questions about like restaurants, and there was a New York Times article a few months ago or a few weeks ago about how are restaurants trying to deal with people who aren't eating very much, and along with the to-go box, which is certainly a classic. I remember from my own Weight Watchers days of being encouraged to like just eat a small part, or get the to-go box with your entree and put half of it away. I mean, all these tricks of the trade. But I'm curious if any of our panelists or anybody here on the panel have noticed anything expressly written on a menu. Has anyone put more appetizers on the menu? The New York Times article was reporting that restaurateurs were putting on more shareable plates, smaller portions. I don't know if anyone's calling it out. I'm curious about things like raw fish, more protein. So just a couple minutes to Shaun or Kimberly or Marion, have you noticed anything on a restaurant menu reacting to people not eating? And then raise your hand. Shaun, go ahead.
I have not seen restaurant menus in particular, but so Found Health, the company that I worked for, did a survey with a Substack newsletter called Feed Me, which is really, they always dive into really fascinating data about society and culture and interpret it. And so they did a joint survey about GLP-1 use and how it's affecting lifestyle. And one of the things mentioned in the article that was kind of interpreting the data was a rise of clubsterants. So restaurants are kind of morphing into clubs, and the reason was that people are wanting more vibe, they want more fun, they want a place to socialize, they want a place to be comfortable, but they don't necessarily want a lot of food. So it was kind of noting a trend of restaurants kind of providing more of that than necessarily changing the menu. And then I have noticed more mocktails on menus. Like some people do drink on GLP-1s. I don't. I think a lot of people who are on GLP-1s typically or may have other health issues that would encourage them not to drink alcohol. So I'm seeing more mocktails on menus. And I'm in Atlanta and Baltimore now, the DC and DMV area. So that's where I'm seeing that.
Marion, tell us what you've seen?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything about GLP-1 on menus, but because the hot trend in the food industry right now is protein, and the protein plays right into the GLP-1 issue because GLP-1 users say they want more protein in fewer calories. They want a higher concentration of protein, whether they, because of the worry about what you talked about, which was the loss of muscle. And there's some evidence that if you eat more protein, you retain muscle better, but it's not very good evidence. And the whole muscle thing is a huge concern. Um, what you see is there are food product manufacturers who are putting GLP-1 on the products. Nestle, no relation, has a line of foods designed for GLP-1 users that are high in protein, high in vitamins and minerals, high in fiber, low in calories, and no sugar and no artificial sweeteners. And Cargill has meals that are designed for GLP users. And what's interesting about those is the portions are small. We're getting back to smaller portions. I'm very happy about that. I think that's a really good thing. But that says GLP-1 right on the package. So there it is. And the studies, as I said earlier, the studies are showing a 6% drop in purchases by GLP-1 users. And what this has done to the food industry in general is played into the four things that are currently threats to the food industry. One of them is GLP-1 drugs. Another is RFK Jr., whose policies are scaring the food industry. The whole concern about ultra-processed foods. And then what's happening with prices, not only in grocery stores, but in restaurants. And the one other restaurant trend that I'm seeing is people are eating earlier. It's astonishing to walk around the streets in New York, and it's warm, so people are still eating outdoors, and restaurants are packed at 5 o'clock.
Well, that's interesting.
And they are not packed at 11 o'clock at night. So that's an amazing change that has happened. And whether that's due to the drugs or due to the pandemic or due to a combination of factors, I don't know. But one of the recommendations to people on GLP-1 drugs is to eat earlier and leave more time for your food to digest before you go to sleep, because that will prevent acid reflux and the reflux problems. So interesting, lots of changes.
Lots of changes. I, for one, I spent a lot of time at food trade shows, and we're starting to see this GLP-1 friendly label, which is not an official label, certainly with high fiber products. And then the kind of supplement industry is really jumping on that bandwagon with obviously more protein powders, but lots of fiber options and just having more fiber. Now, obviously, it would be great to get your fiber from real foods and vegetables. I know, Marion, I'm just going to say that for you,
Thank you.
versus some of the ingredients in those fibers, but it is a bandwagon and people are jumping on it. I'd like to move next to this thought. Well, I have two last questions here before I'll turn this over to other people who'd like to share a question. We've kind of addressed a few. I'm going to bring up a couple, but one is there still a stigma around taking these drugs? And then the second one is, what happens when you have to get off the drug? For various reasons. I listened to an interesting podcast from The Guardian last week, The Guardian UK, with people in the UK now having to get off the drug because of the tariffs that are being put on the drugs that are being imported into the UK, although I don't know why they're not getting them from Denmark. But in any case, certain people now, because of prices, have to go off the drug. So let's start first with the question of, do we sense that there's still a stigma? Kimberly, I'll talk to you because clearly in your community, our community, you know other women and men taking it. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I've seen everything across the board. I've seen people who do not want people to know they're on it. They're absolutely very private. Some people feel guilty because they have access, to Shaun's point, financially to this, and don't feel like it's appropriate to sort of boast about that. Um, Others, I think, just want to be private, and that's just their nature. In my case, I just feel I've been so pleased with all the numbers that I want to kind of shout it out, at least for now. This is an experiment. I guess it's a great social experiment, but in my case, it's just been very healthy. So, yeah, I do think there's a little bit of it, but I think others are seeing the benefits that outweigh having to keep it private.
Thanks. Shaun, what about you? What are you seeing?
So in the survey that I mentioned that Found did with Feed Me, we asked people about how they feel about the drugs, and it mirrors what Kimberly just said. There are people who aren't on the drug and think it's cheating. There are people who are on the drug and don't want people to know because they're embarrassed. And then there are people who are like, look, this is life's changing. Like, this is a revolutionary breakthrough. Do what you need to do to be healthy. So there's still a range. I think a lot of the stigma comes from our understanding or misunderstanding about what obesity is. We all still are cultured to believe that it's a personal failing when in 2013, the American Medical Association recognized that it is a chronic metabolic disease that requires ongoing medical care. It's a disease. Other organizations, the World Health Organization, both boards of endocrinology, there are other organizations that now recognize that obesity is a disease and you deserve medical care for it, just like you would any other disease. But I think that understanding is still filtering out to the general population. And so it's going to take some time for stigmas to change.
Marion?
Yeah, there are questions in the chat about how much the drugs cost, and I think that's worth talking about. My understanding is they're $200 a month on up, but maybe the people who are taking them can comment on what they're paying. The compounded drugs obviously cost a lot less, but then there are worries about how good they are. I don't.
Yeah. Since I worked in that industry, so
Mm.
the compounded medications can be anywhere from $99 a month up to $250 a month. The thing with compounded medications is you wanna, if you get them, I'm not gonna pretend like people aren't. So if you get them, be sure they are manufactured in a 503A or 503B facility. These are compounding pharmacies that are regulated by state boards of pharmacy, and they have to follow FDA regulations. They're not like the FDA doesn't come inspect them, but there's a list of guidelines from the FDA that those pharmacies have to follow. So be sure you're getting, if you do get compounded medications, they're coming from a pharmacy that's being overseen by a state board of pharmacy. And then if you are paying, if you had to pay the list price for these is anywhere between $900 and $1,600. One of the things that these manufacturers have done since they've come out and said, okay, you guys got to stop compounding, they recognize that people do need affordable drugs. And their response was, okay, the cost is really in the auto injectors. So now you can go to Lilly Direct, which is their online pharmacy, or you can go to Novo Norcare, and they're anywhere from $3.99 to $4.99, depending on the dosage. But the thing is that most of the time, I think Wegovy may be the exception, but the other ones in Ozempic, but you have to inject it yourself. So you'll get a vial and you'll get syringes, and there'll be a video to tell you how to do it. It's a subcutaneous injection, so it's under the skin, so it's not too scary to do. But just know that that's what you're getting if you're paying $4.99. And it's some people mentioned like Costco is now offering Ozempic and Wegovy at $4.99. It's basically that same offer that the online pharmacy from pharmaceutical manufacturers are offering.
Thank you. And somebody put in the chat here, thanks, Donnie. Glad you're here. Costco is going to carry Ozempic and Wegovy at about $500. Of course, you still need to have a prescription for that. And I'm sure there's going to be a mad rush. So I'm not quite sure how they're going to prioritize who's going to get that at every Costco. And then, the conversations of what's your health care. A friend of mine just got a letter from her healthcare provider saying it's no longer going to cover the cost of these drugs starting in 2026. So what do you do? I also know people who are crossing borders to get Ozempic from other places or from the UK. So all kinds of things. Shaun?
In terms of access, just to kind of segue onto that. Um, one thing that people are doing, and I think somebody asked a question about this, is microdosing. So microdosing can be appropriate. Again, you'll want to talk to your provider, but it can be appropriate for managing side effects. And I really like the Ozempic pen for this because you can dial the dosage. So like if you're having some side effects, your doctor might say, okay, dial it down a couple of clicks so you're getting a little bit of a less dose. It can also help, like if you're on a medication and you need to, like a brand name medication, you need to stretch it out a little bit, like for affordability or access. So that is one way that people are saving on costs, is they are microdosing. Microdosing can also be appropriate if you've reached your weight loss goal and you want to maintain. You can microdose to help still have some GLP-1 in your body, but you don't need the full dose to help prevent regain. And I know that opens a can of worms into another question that we've had.
Yes, well, we have a question about, hitting that plateau. And again, we are not doctors or medical advisors, but and I'm curious, Kimberly, if you've hit a plateau personally, or if you just have to wait it out.
Yeah.
Kimberly, what's
That waited
happening?
out, WEIGHT.
That's right, pun intended.
Sorry, had to throw a little levity there. Yes, I plateaued, and I'm wondering now if some of the muscle mass gain and the fat burn, because there, I will say this: I've lost tone, and so I'm really eager to get my muscle tone back. So yeah, I've plateaued now for about 3, 4 months, which creates this sort of, okay, well, I'll just keep going. In my case, I'm paying, the compounded $4.99 a month price, which, in a time when the wine industry is going through a contraction, has not been, it's been a luxury I mean, I use my HSA for that. I try to be very clever about, my money spend during tight times. But yeah, I'm hoping that the exercise program will begin to, accelerate the tone that I'm looking for. I'm really not as obsessed with the number on the scale as I used to be, because I feel like, if things are fitting well and I've got, more muscle tone, I'm pretty happy with that. But if I can lose another 10, I call that my little negotiation 10 around the holidays, where, you might gain some weight and therefore you have a little bit of wiggle room on either side.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Shaun, any thoughts about plateauing?
Yeah, so obesity is a very complex disease. Like there are over 300 uh, genes connected to obesity in some way. Hormones can impact obesity, brain chemistry can impact obesity, and it's different for everybody. And so one of the things that can happen as people lose weight is something called metabolic adaptation, where you're losing weight and your body's like, oh, I want to go back to where we were. I was good with that. And so it'll try to change your metabolism and your brain chemistry and your hormones to get you back to that weight. Other things can throw you off too. Like if you're not getting regular sleep is as there are research studies showing that sleep is as important as exercise and diet for managing your weight. So sleep is really important. So if your sleep gets off, that can impact, whether you're continuing to maintain your weight or progress toward the weight loss goal that you have in mind. Also, stress can also trigger hormones that can impact your weight. So what I usually tell people is if you hit a plateau or you're taking these drugs and you're not seeing the results that you want, understand that, GLP-1s aren't right for everybody. That's not everybody's problem. Even in the manufacturer studies, with semaglutide, like 17% of people didn't lose any weight at all because that wasn't their problem. That wasn't their body chemistry. That wasn't what was causing their weight gain. So you need a professional who understands obesity. So I tell people, go see an obesity medicine specialist. You can go to obesitymedicine.org. There's a directory. You can plug in a zip code and find one near you, or go to an endocrinologist who understands obesity, and talk to them and let them help you figure out what's causing your obesity and match the medicine to that. That's the real phenomenon of weight loss medication now. It's like the GLP-1s are amazing, blockbuster, but the real like game changer is that drugs are being made to target what is causing your obesity, right? So, Ozempic may not be right for everybody. Like it could be another drug that, manages something else. And just to kind of segue on that, a lot of people, I'm often in helping people who are doing weight loss surgery, and people will hit a plateau or they'll regain weight after surgery and they feel like, oh, I failed. And, or they'll ask about drugs, and the other people are like, why would you need drugs after you just had weight loss surgery? Weight loss surgery is still the most powerful um, therapy for managing obesity, but it doesn't address everything. And that's because obesity is so complex. So really just understanding that obesity is a disease and you need medical care for it, and you should have a professional help you figure out what's right for you is the right way to go, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will just have one last call. If anyone has a question, please put it in the chat. Otherwise, I want to turn to the future. And we just have a few minutes left. Marion, what do you see in the future? And certainly as food professionals, any tips for managing this? It does sound like more and more people will eventually get access. It might be a little bumpy next year, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think there's any question that more people will get access. The cost will come down, and they will move from injections to pills. I mean, that's surely going to happen. It's just a question of when. And more people are going to be on them. From the food industry's perspective, the retail food industry is already talking about a shelf notification for GLP-1 friendly products. And these will be products that are high in nutrients, low in calories, and low in artificial sweeteners and other kinds of additives that make the products ultra processed. And they're already talking about it. I mean, there's a lot of discussion in the grocery industry about how they're going to deal with the downtick because of the four things that are affecting sales, which are, as I mentioned before, are RFK Jr., GLP-1 drugs, ultra processed, and the prices that have gone up so dramatically in the grocery industry. So it's very difficult to pull out of that how much of the difficulty is due to the drugs and how much is due to the price increase or to some of these other things. But I don't see that changing, and certainly not in the next year or two. After that, who knows? People still have to eat.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, Marion.
if they're eating more healthfully, I'm for it.
I'm waiting for everyone to start digging their gardens and planting seeds again. And
Oh, good idea. I'm for that too.
yeah, that's great. Kimberly, 1 minute, 30 seconds. How do you see your future? Are you going to stay on this for a while?
I am going to stay on it for the foreseeable future. I hope to have, learned some new habits that will shape a potential, future without the drug. I'm glad it's going down. This has been super informative for me, taking lots of notes to look at options here. But as long as my numbers are where they are and they continue to either plateau or go down, I'm really thrilled with that. So yeah, we shall see. We shall see. I personally believe exactly what Marion's saying, which is, all you really do need to do is, adjust the types of food you're eating and eat more healthily and more mindfully and do all the things that we should be doing. So let's hope
Right.
that happens.
Thanks. Shaun, what about you? Predictions for the immediate future? I mean, there may be a ton of people falling off the drug and struggling while more people get on it. What are you seeing?
I think more people are gonna be taking this medication not only for treating obesity, but also there are so many uses now. It's recently been approved for sleep apnea, kidney disease, fatty liver disease, which is an amazing breakthrough. And then it's being studied for Alzheimer's and PCOS and substance addiction. I have a friend who had an alcohol abuse problem, and he started taking a GLP-1, and he has no desire whatsoever since he started. So there are going to be more applications that are legit for these uses, and I think more people are going to be on them. I think the food industry is going to continue to change. I always wonder, like, why is the food industry scared of people not eating snacks? Like, what's wrong with our food industry that
Oh,
they
gee.
can't adapt?
Oh, Marion has one word for you.
They make a lot of money off of them. It's really simple.
Yeah, we
That's
do.
their goal.
We still live in a capitalist society
Me
here.
too.
Right?
So
But I still love to eat, and I eat good. Like, I eat so little, like I don't have room for bad food. Like, I need everything to be good. So just give me really good food in small doses. That should be a commercially viable path.
It's
okay,
not.
well, I have to stop us here. We have hit the hour. I know I'm going to let Sheila close us off officially, but I want to thank everyone who's participated, who joined today, who put in, there have been some recommendations about some books and things. Somebody told me you should really eat breakfast to get through your plateau, get your metabolism going, all kinds of good things. Thank you to our panelists for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Sheila to wrap us up.
Thank you again, Marion, Shaun, Kimberly, and Kara. We appreciate all the information that you've given us. This is news that you can use. Before we close, a reminder to LDEI chapter presidents, your year-end summary of chapter accomplishments and list of chapter delegates is due on October 20th. The Council of Delegates online meeting is scheduled for November 20th. Mark your calendars. Please join us on Tuesday, November 11th, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time for festive flavors and gatherings featuring a number of your Dom friends and colleagues who will share their secrets for hosting wonderful holiday parties. Thank you for joining us. When you receive the follow-up email with a link to the recorded event, there will be a link to a brief survey. Please take a moment to complete it so that we may continue to provide programming that meets your needs and interest. This is your host, Sheila Cry, saying so long for now.